There is a car on the road right now that can drive from New York to Denver on a single tank of gas. Not a hydrogen prototype, not a concept car wrapped in camouflage tape, hidden from spy photographers at some testing facility in the desert. A real car, sold to real customers, rolling off a real assembly line today. And here's the part nobody in Detroit or Tokyo wants you to think too hard about. It isn't electric. For the last decade, we've all absorbed the same story. Gas engines are old technology. They're maxed out. The only way forward is electric, and if you're not ready to make that jump, you're basically driving a museum piece. That's the narrative. That's what the ads say, what the think pieces say, what half of YouTube says. It's wrong. Or at least it's about to be. Because a company most Americans have never heard of just built a gasoline engine so efficient that Guinness World Records had to create a new category just to certify it. Not efficient for a gas engine. Not impressive considering. The most efficient combustion engine ever mass-produced in human history. It gets better mileage than a Prius by a wide margin. It gets better mileage than almost anything with a gas tank has ever gotten. And the numbers are so far outside what engineers thought was physically practical that when the announcement first circulated, more than a few automotive journalists assumed it was a translation error. It wasn't. By the end of this video, you're going to understand exactly how a man who started with $3,000 and a workshop full of refrigerator parts ended up humbling Formula One engineering teams, buying Volvo out from under Ford, and quietly becoming the largest individual shareholder in Mercedes-Benz. You're going to understand why the phrase hybrids are just a bridge to electric might be one of the most expensive assumptions the auto industry has ever made. And you're going to understand why, whether you drive a Ford, a Buick, a Volvo, or a Mercedes, the engine under your next car's hood may already be shaped by decisions being made right now in a Chinese city most people couldn't find on a map. If stories like this are the reason you're here, the ones where an industry gets blindsided by something it never saw coming, do me a favor and hit subscribe before we go further. This channel exists to catch these shifts early while everyone else is still catching up. Let's start with the man, because the engine doesn't make sense without him. The factory worker who refused to know his place. In 1963, in a farming village in Zhejiang province, a boy named Li Shufu was born into a life that had already been mapped out for him. Farm work, maybe a factory job if he was lucky. Nobody in that village was raising a future auto tycoon, and nobody around him was dreaming about engines, patents, or world records. Li Shufu didn't stick to the map. In 1986, barely into adulthood, he scraped together roughly $3,000 borrowed from relatives and opened a small workshop. The product wasn't glamorous, refrigerator components, the unglamorous guts of home appliances nobody thinks twice about. But he treated that tiny operation the way some people treat a calling. He wasn't interested in staying small. By 1994, he'd pivoted into motorcycle manufacturing, a much bigger and much riskier leap. Then, in 1997, he did something that made people in the industry laugh out loud and not kindly. He announced he was going to build cars. He had no engineering background, no factory suited for automotive production. No connections inside the industry, no partnerships, no institutional backing. When journalists pressed him on how difficult building an actual automobile might be, he reportedly shrugged it off with a line that became something of a legend in Chinese business circles. A car, he said, is just 4 wheels and 2 sofas bolted together. Simple, almost insultingly so. The industry did not find it funny. They found it delusional. But in 2001, his company, Geely, became the first privately owned Chinese company ever granted a license to manufacture automobiles. That alone should have quieted the skeptics. It didn't. Li Shufu kept pushing. In 2007, he sent Ford Motor Company an offer to purchase Volvo. Ford didn't take it seriously enough to respond properly. In 2008, he flew to the Detroit Auto Show and made his case in person. Ford brushed him off a second time. Most people would have stopped there. He came back again in 2009, more prepared, more specific, harder to dismiss. In 2010, he walked out of Ford's headquarters, having closed a deal worth $1.8 billion. And Volvo, a European brand with decades of engineering prestige, belonged to a Chinese company that 13 years earlier had been laughed at for wanting to build cars at all. He wasn't finished. In 2018, he quietly acquired nearly 10% of Daimler AG, the parent company of Mercedes-Benz, making him the single largest individual shareholder of one of the most storied luxury brands on the planet. Today, under the Geely Group umbrella sit Volvo, Polestar, Lotus, Zeekr, Lynk & Co., and a long list of other brands spanning multiple continents. That's the empire. And the engineering culture that built that empire, stubborn, relentless, allergic to being told something is impossible, is exactly what produced the engine we're about to talk about. But before we get into what that engine actually does, we need to talk about the problem it was built to solve. Because without understanding that problem, the achievement doesn't land the way it should. The part of the electric car story that doesn't make it into the commercials. Electric vehicles were supposed to be the tidy, obvious solution. Plug in at night, wake up to a full tank, never visit a gas station again. In a lot of ways, the technology genuinely delivers on that promise. But the day-to-day experience of actually owning one has turned out to be messier than the marketing suggests, and the cracks have been visible for a while to anyone paying close attention. Start with road trips. The commercials show a driver pulling up to a charger, plugging in, and walking away like it's nothing. In practice, even the fastest charging stations available today typically take somewhere between 20 and 40 minutes to get a battery back up to around 80%. That's not a quick pit stop. That's long enough to eat a full meal, finish an episode of something, or watch a kid in the back seat go from mildly bored to fully unraveling. On a solo trip, it's a minor annoyance. With a family and a schedule, it becomes a genuine source of stress. Then there's cold weather, which almost never makes it into the brochure. EV batteries are chemically sensitive to low temperatures, and once it drops below freezing, most electric vehicles lose somewhere between 30% and 40% of their advertised range. That means the 300-mile range you paid a premium for can shrink to somewhere around 180 miles on a frigid January morning in Minnesota or Michigan. The math on your trip planning changes fast and not in your favor. There's also the long-term cost that rarely gets discussed up front. EV batteries degrade over time, the same way the battery in your phone slowly loses its ability to hold a charge. When they eventually need replacing, the bill can land anywhere from $10,000 to $20,000 or more. Not a routine repair, but the kind of expense that can erase years of fuel savings in one visit to the shop. And then there's the piece of the conversation that gets left out almost entirely: what it actually takes to build these batteries in the first place. Lithium, cobalt, and nickel don't appear out of thin air. Extracting them involves large-scale open-pit mining operations with serious environmental consequences. And in the case of cobalt specifically, well-documented human rights concerns in some of the regions where it's mined. These aren't fringe talking points. They're ongoing issues the industry is actively wrestling with. None of this means electric vehicles are a bad idea or that they lack a real future. They absolutely have one. But for hundreds of millions of drivers today, an EV isn't a frictionless upgrade. It's a lifestyle adjustment with real trade-offs attached. So a different question starts to form. What if nobody had to make that trade-off at all? What if, instead of asking the entire world to rebuild its habits around charging infrastructure that doesn't fully exist yet, someone simply figured out how to extract so much more efficiency out of a traditional gasoline engine that the old limitations basically stopped applying? That's the exact question Geely set out to answer. And what they came back with is something the rest of the industry genuinely did not see coming. The engine that rewrote the record books in April 2026 at the Beijing Auto Show, Geely unveiled what they're calling their IHEV Intelligent Hybrid System. The centerpiece is a new engine designated the BHE-15A, a 1.5-liter four-cylinder engine. On paper, that's a small, unremarkable displacement, the kind of number you'd expect from a basic economy commuter car, nothing that screams world record. But the number Geely put up on the screen when they revealed its thermal efficiency rating stopped a lot of engineers in their tracks: 48.41%. If that phrase means nothing to you, here's the plain language version. Every combustion engine wastes a huge portion of the energy locked inside its fuel. When gasoline burns, only part of that released energy actually turns into forward motion. A significant chunk escapes as heat through the exhaust system, and more gets eaten up by internal friction. Thermal efficiency is simply the measurement of how much of that total energy actually becomes usable movement instead of being thrown away as waste heat. The average gasoline engine on American roads today converts roughly 30% to 35% of its fuel's energy into actual motion. Everything else disappears into the atmosphere as heat. Toyota's hybrid system, long considered the gold standard, the technology that turned the Prius into a cultural shorthand for fuel efficiency, sits at around 41%. For decades, that 41% figure was treated as close to the ceiling of what was realistically achievable in a car people could actually buy. Geely hit 48.41%. Guinness World Records sent representatives to independently verify the testing and made it official. The highest thermal efficiency ever recorded for a mass-produced automotive engine in history. Here's the comparison that really puts it in perspective. Formula One engines, the most obsessively refined, most expensively engineered internal combustion machines ever built by human beings, backed by teams spending hundreds of millions of dollars chasing fractions of a percentage point operate at roughly 50% thermal efficiency. Geely's production engine, the one sitting under the hood of a car an ordinary person can walk into a dealership and buy, now sits within 2 percentage points of Formula One territory. That's not a modest improvement. That's an entire generation of leapfrogging compressed into a single announcement. But an efficiency number on a test bench only tells you so much. The real question is what happens when that engine gets put into an actual car and driven on an actual road. How the engine actually pulls this off. It's worth pausing here, because the natural question is, how does an engine just suddenly get this much better? Engineers have been refining internal combustion for well over a century. It's not like nobody thought to try harder before. Part of the answer is a redesigned combustion process that allows the engine to run at a much higher compression ratio than earlier hybrid engines could safely tolerate, extracting more usable energy out of every drop of fuel before it's expelled as exhaust. Part of it is a dramatically simplified internal friction profile. Fewer moving parts fighting against each other, less energy lost simply keeping the engine's own components turning. And part of it is that this engine was never designed to operate alone. In a traditional car, the gas engine does all the work, all the time, regardless of whether that's the most efficient way to move the car forward. Geely's system instead treats the combustion engine and the electric motor as two specialists that hand tasks back and forth depending on which one is better suited to the moment. Stop-and-go traffic, low speeds, gentle acceleration. The electric motor typically takes the lead, since combustion engines are notoriously inefficient at low loads. Sustained highway cruising, where a gas engine can run at its most efficient operating point for long stretches. The combustion engine takes over, with the electric motor assisting only when extra power is needed. The part that makes this genuinely different from earlier hybrid systems is the AI layer making those handoff decisions continuously, adjusting in real time based on road grade, traffic patterns, driving style, and remaining charge, rather than switching between a handful of pre-programmed modes the way older hybrid systems do. The engine spends less time operating outside its efficient range, which is exactly where most of that wasted heat and friction loss happens in a conventional car. Multiply that improvement across millions of driving miles, and you start to understand how a small, unremarkable 1.5-liter engine ends up outperforming machines that cost hundreds of millions of dollars to develop. 106 miles per gallon. And it's verified. Geely paired the BHE-15 with a 308 horsepower electric motor and wired the whole system into an AI-driven energy management platform that continuously reads driving conditions and decides in real time exactly how much work the engine should do versus the motor. The result is a hybrid powertrain making decisions with a level of precision that simply wasn't available to earlier generations of hybrid technology. They took the finished product, the Geely Galaxy M8 Grand Sedan, to a closed test circuit in Hainan, China, and ran it through a standardized fuel consumption test. The result? An average consumption of 2.2 liters per 100 kilometers. Converted into terms familiar to American drivers, that works out to roughly 106 miles per gallon. Guinness independently verified this figure as well, separately from the engine's thermal efficiency certification, meaning one car program walked away with two distinct, independently confirmed world records. Let's translate that into something you can actually picture. A typical car with a 15-gallon tank averaging 30 miles per gallon gives you roughly 450 miles of range before you need to refuel. That same 15-gallon tank at 106 miles per gallon delivers close to 1,590 miles. That's enough to drive from Los Angeles to Denver and then make it most of the way back on a single fill-up. For a direct benchmark, look at Toyota. In 2024, Toyota drove a Prius from Los Angeles to New York specifically to showcase real-world hybrid efficiency, a carefully staged, purpose-built demonstration of their best technology. They averaged 92.9 miles per gallon across the entire cross-country trip, and the automotive press rightly celebrated it as an impressive feat. Geely beat that number by more than 12%. Not with a hand-built prototype or a specially tuned show car, but with a standard production sedan available for regular customers to purchase. Geely's spokesperson, Victor Yang, didn't mince words about what this means. He stated plainly that their technology will comprehensively surpass Japanese hybrid technology, a direct shot at Toyota and Honda, the two brands that have effectively owned the hybrid conversation for 3 decades. It's a bold claim to make out loud. But stack 48.41% against Toyota's 41% and 106 miles per gallon against 92.9, and the numbers back it up. And here's what makes this even more significant. Geely isn't the only one doing this. The race. While most of the global conversation around automotive innovation has fixated on electric vehicles, an entire ecosystem of Chinese automakers has been making rapid, parallel advances in hybrid engineering. Advances that add up to something far bigger than any single company's headline. BYD, the brand that has already outsold Tesla globally in electric vehicles, released its 5th-generation hybrid system in 2024, hitting 46.06% thermal efficiency. That's lower than Geely's record-setting number, but it still comfortably outpaces anything Toyota or Honda has managed to put into production. Even more striking, BYD's hybrid vehicles can achieve a combined range of roughly 2,100 kilometers, more than 1,300 miles, on a single tank and a single charge. Picture driving non-stop from Miami to Boston without needing fuel or electricity along the way, and you're roughly there. Xpeng, a brand most Americans have likely never encountered, achieved 45% thermal efficiency in its L7 sedan. Chang'an, Seres, GAC, Sherry, and Great Wall have all released vehicles with combined ranges exceeding 2,000 kilometers within the last year and a half. These aren't distant concept vehicles or future promises sitting in a press release. They're on sale right now. Now here's the part of this story that matters most if you're not planning to buy a car built in China. Why this engine is coming to your driveway. Whether you know it or not, Geely doesn't only sell cars in China. Geely owns Volvo. Geely owns Polestar. Geely owns Lotus. Geely runs a joint venture with Mercedes-Benz that produces the Smart brand. And through a powertrain licensing partnership called Horse Powertrain, Geely licenses its engine technology out to other automakers around the world. That means the BHE-15 engine and the broader IHEV hybrid system are not staying locked inside Chinese borders. This technology is already being folded into Volvo's future product roadmap. It's going to show up in vehicles sold across Europe within the next few years, and eventually it will land in American dealerships, wearing badges that already feel completely familiar to American buyers. What this actually means for people who just want to drive a hybrid, getting 106 miles per gallon, means filling up roughly once a month instead of once a week. It means taking a road trip without the low-level anxiety of hunting for a working charger in a rural stretch of highway. It means not rewiring your garage, not overhauling your morning routine, and not setting aside a mental line item for a potential $10,000 plus battery replacement somewhere down the road. You just drive, and you barely touch the fuel gauge doing it. For people living in cold climates, rural areas, or anywhere the charging network hasn't caught up yet, this kind of hybrid technology isn't a consolation prize or a, for now, compromise. For a lot of people, it may genuinely be the more practical, more affordable option for the next decade, at least while grid infrastructure and charging networks continue catching up to demand. Gas stations exist on nearly every corner in most of the country, and running low on fuel rarely feels like an emergency because a solution is almost always 5 minutes away. Running low on charge in an area with sparse charging infrastructure feels categorically different, even if it happens rarely. A hybrid this efficient doesn't just save money at the pump, it removes that specific nagging form of anxiety almost entirely, since a near-empty tank is refilled in under 5 minutes practically anywhere in the country. It also matters environmentally. A vehicle burning dramatically less fuel produces dramatically fewer emissions. It's not a zero-emission solution, and it won't replace the case for full electrification long-term. But it represents a serious step forward that doesn't carry the same mining footprint as large battery electric vehicles. It's a different kind of progress, and it's a real one, available today rather than promised for some future year. For the auto industry itself, this is closer to a reckoning. The working assumption across Detroit and Tokyo has been that hybrids are a temporary bridge, a stopgap technology on the way to a fully electric future, worth maintaining but not worth heavily reinvesting in. What Geely just demonstrated is that the bridge is a lot longer and a lot more capable than almost anyone in the West assumed. Companies that quietly deprioritized hybrid R&D as yesterday's technology may now find themselves years behind on something that hundreds of millions of consumers are about to want very badly. The future of what sits under your hood wasn't decided in Detroit. It wasn't decided in Tokyo. It was decided in a city called Hangzhou. And now every automaker on the planet has to figure out what comes next. If this changed how you think about the hybrids are just a bridge to electric narrative, Hit that like button and subscribe so you don't miss the next one. Turn notifications on too, because the next development coming out of China's auto industry makes this engine look like a warm-up act. Now I actually want to know what you think. If a hybrid genuinely got you 106 miles per gallon, would that change your mind about going fully electric? Or are you still all in on batteries no matter what? Drop your answer in the comments. I read everyone.